And last but not least, we have AI capabilities in higher education.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Arnold.
I'm Michelle Fleming.
I'm Logan Gaudet.
I'm Lauren Handel. Today we will be talking about artificial intelligence, or AI, capabilities in higher education. We would like to start off with an overview of what we will be discussing in this presentation. First, in the background, we will describe AI ethical concerns, and some areas for improvement within higher education. Next, we will move on to the goal of our sponsor and the team to solve the problem. Then we will move on to the methodology, or how the team solved the problem. And finally, we will talk about our findings, or the practical analysis of our deliverables.
We are now going to get into the background of our project. Artificial intelligence, commonly referred to as AI, is a branch of computer science, and its purpose is to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. Machine intelligence is commonly used as a synonym for AI, but can also refer to forms of intelligence which are beyond human intelligence, such as finding complex patterns in very large amounts of data. Machine learning and deep learning are both within the realm of artificial intelligence. Machine learning is essentially the process by which machines acquire knowledge, and deep learning goes much further and attempts to analyze the nature of the phenomena that the data represents.
Ethical dilemmas are a large consideration in the discussion of artificial intelligence. There are safety concerns about AI, such as with autonomous vehicles, and research shows that AI picks up racial and gender biases when learning from what humans write. Without any supervision, a machine learning algorithm learns to associate female names more with family words than career words, and white names as being more pleasant than names from other cultures. Privacy is a huge discussion with modern technology. Consider facial recognition technology and convenient tech that makes it easier to collect information about you. Meanwhile, AI can do facial analysis, speech recognition, emotional recognition, and more, all without permission or cooperation from the individual. AI is also reshaping how we interact with each other. An experiment from Yale professor Nicholas Christakis showed that group dynamics in humans can be altered by introducing human-like bots. A group working together will cease to cooperate when bots join the group. In addition, civil rights will be compromised if AI is secured for only privileged members of society. And finally, the concern of job loss is a big topic of discussion. Stories of factory workers being replaced by robots create ethical dilemmas for AI. And as AI continues to evolve, the ethical concerns surrounding these areas will change as well.
In terms of where AI fits into higher education, there are currently several problems facing higher education institutions. The first one is that of decreasing enrollment. A study conducted in 2016 found that nearly 60% of colleges that they interviewed had reported missing their enrollment goal for that year. As fewer students attend universities, universities lose necessary income to remain functional. Another problem is that of falling degree completion rates. From 2016 to 2017, only 60% of students at four-year universities finished within 6 years of beginning their degree requirement. If degree completion is to serve as an indicator of a successful education of students, then many colleges are widely failing at this task. The last major problem that we looked at is that of increasing costs. From 1986 to 2007, the average cost of tuition has increased by over 90%. As cost of attending higher education institutions increases, it makes it more difficult for students to attend college and can also be a factor in some of the other major problems that we looked at. We will now be going into the goal of our project. The goal that we came up with is to explore the impact of AI in higher education, specifically at Worcester Polytechnic Institute by 2030 and 2050. In order to reach this goal, we came up with three primary objectives. Our first objective is to gather expert opinion on how AI can improve higher education. Our second objective is to address ethical concerns with using AI in higher education. Our final objective is to make recommendations for WPI to improve using AI.
Now we will move into our methodology. Our methodology consists of 3 stages. The first stage being the 3-round Delphi study we conducted with a panel of artificial intelligence experts in higher education. We reached out to over 200 artificial intelligence experts at various universities across the country. The second stage is a feedback survey. In this stage, we sent a survey to administration in higher education, specifically at WPI, to obtain feedback on how AI could be implemented in higher education in various ways. The last stage is when we will be making recommendations for WPI to improve using AI.
The first round of our Delphi study was our idea generation round. We started our survey by asking open-ended questions to avoid response bias. We asked the AI experts to look at the year 2030 and 2050. The year 2030 representing a near future with current technology, and 2050 representing a future with creative and new tech. We asked the AI experts to look at the main areas of higher education that are listed in the light bulb and choose which areas are the most relevant. The experts then made predictions on how AI would impact these areas, thus creating the outpouring of subcategories that you see. The goal of round 1 was to get broad opinions and predictions so we could further narrow down data to achieve consensus and divergence in future rounds.
The goal of the second round, or the categorization round, was to generate as many original ideas as possible within the university categories. We broke our survey into 2 parts, first asking for predictions about 2030, and then moving on to ask for predictions.
Yeah, it's a little, like, really cringy.
Yeah, I think I put a little too much like.
Okay. Is this better if I talk louder? Is this better? Okay. We broke our survey into 2 parts, first asking for predictions about 2030, then moving on for predictions about 2050. These icons represent the ideas generated from this round. These will be explained in a few minutes when we present our findings. We anonymously shared the most thought-provoking results from round 1 with our round 2 participants. We asked them if they agreed or disagreed with the trends in the data. After each disagree-agree style question, we asked the round 2 participants to share any new thoughts that the round 1 responses evoked. At the conclusion of the survey, we asked our participants if any of the data surprised them or changed their mind. This is where we were able to gain rich insight on how AI experts interacted with each other's near and distant future predictions.
In the third round of the Delphi study, we asked participants to react to statements that were made in the second round. This way, we were able to see if our participants changed their mind after being presented with opposing viewpoints. In this round, we attempted to collect consensus and divergence within the data that we received. Additionally, we asked our participants to rank the areas of higher education that they felt were most likely to be impacted by the implementation of AI, as well as the categories of higher education that they felt were least likely to be affected by the implementation of AI. After completing the Delphi study, we attempted to determine how feasible it would be to implement AI into higher education. In order to do this, we reached out to administrators at WPI and asked them to allocate resources based on how they would determine which areas of AI they felt needed the most resources to be implemented. Additionally, we reached out to ethicists at WPI in order to investigate the problems with ethical concerns of using AI in higher education.
Now we will look at the findings from our study. First, in this round 1, we were looking for what university categories might be improved with artificial intelligence. As you can see here, in 2030, 2 of the most frequent categories that experts made predictions in were learning and instruction and student experience. Now, taking a look at the 2050 results, you can see that the learning and instruction and student experience categories remain on top. As you can see, there is an increase in responses for personalized career planning and athletics, and we did have one other response, including the original ideas of vision, speech, and natural language understanding and robotics in disability assistance.
Now moving into the findings for round 2. We asked participants to either agree or disagree with quotes we obtained from the first round survey responses. We gave them 5 main categories, which included learning and instruction, athletics, student experience, facilities, and enrollment, each with their own subcategories. An example of one subcategory in each category can be seen here within each quote. Each pie chart represents the total responses we obtained when we presented the experts with quotes for each subcategory. As you can see, the majority of the survey participants agreed that these specific subcategories will be impacted by AI by the year 2030. For example, in the learning and instruction category, there's a subcategory for intelligent agents. The experts were asked to agree or disagree with the quote, "Intelligent agents will provide personalized learning without human intervention by 2030. Most experts agreed or somewhat agreed with this quote. The most divergence can be seen in the facilities category under the facial recognition subcategory. For the second part of round 2, we had the same setup as the first part, this time asking about their predictions for 2050. Again, we asked them to either disagree or agree with quotes we obtained from the first round survey responses. We gave them 4 main categories, which included learning and instruction, academic integrity, facilities, and student experience, each with their own subcategories. As you can see, there was more variation with the predictions for 2050, especially in learning and instruction, where more experts disagreed that AI could replace universities by the year 2050. It can also be noted that 100% of survey participants agreed or somewhat agreed that AI could improve student experience through disability assistance by 2050.
In the third round of the survey, where we asked our participants to rank the areas of higher education that they felt were most likely to be impacted by the implementation of AI, we found that in both the 2030 and the 2050 rounds, our participants ranked the same 3 categories as the most likely to be impacted. These categories were data analysis, learning and instruction, and enrollment. Additionally, we found that our participants ranked the same 2 categories as the 2 categories that were least likely to be impacted in the 2030 and 2050 rounds. These categories were athletics and facilities, with student experience and career planning taking up the middle categories.
Now I will cover the resource allocation from our feedback study with WPI administration and staff. Bearing in mind our goal of increasing WPI's competitive standing in higher education by implementing AI, WPI staff created resource allocation plans to represent how important they think each area is. WPI staff allocated resources to 6 different categories or other. The percentage of resources that each category receive represent how much emphasis they would put on this area for its importance in the future of AI in higher education. This pie chart represents the results from the 2030 resource allocation. Learning and instruction, student experience, and enrollment represented the top 3 categories for the year 2030. This pie chart shows the resource allocations for the year 2050 from WPI experts. Learning and instruction, enrollment, and student experience also represented the top 3 categories of 2050. In both 2030 and 2050, learning and instruction had the majority of focused resources. This might indicate that WPI administration believes that learning and instruction is the most important area of higher education to implement AI in order to increase WPI's competitive standing against other universities.
Now we'll be going over the ethical concerns that we came across while conducting our project. The 2 main ethical considerations that we were made aware of are those of data ownership and privacy concerns. In terms of data ownership, if universities collect data in order to create an AI to assist with the process of higher education, this creates questions of who owns the data that they collect and who should be allowed and who should have ownership of it in terms of monetizing it and other such processes. For privacy concerns, in both our Delphi study and talks with ethicists, it was mentioned that concerns surrounding privacy would have to be addressed before AI could be used for something such as facial recognition for security access.
We used to combine results from our study and our resource allocation to develop a set of recommendations specific to WPI. We recommend that WPI invest most of its AI resources into learning and instruction, specifically looking into personalized learning material and intelligent agents. We also recommend an investment in student experience, specifically focusing on how AI can provide disability assistance. Due to the ethical concerns with privacy, we do not recommend that WPI attempt to implement facial recognition surveillance until these privacy concerns are resolved. Finally, we noticed that the 2030 and 2050 results were quite similar across the board. This could indicate that AI is coming sooner rather than later, and that WPI will hold the best competitive advantage if it invests resources as early as 2030. It is also worth noting that our recommendations for WPI would not be the same recommendations that we would make for all universities. WPI is known for its immersive student experience in learning and instruction, meaning that WPI might be more likely to invest resources into these areas compared to other universities. WPI is not known for its athletics and is not currently struggling with as many other universities to reach their enrollment goals. WPI may be less likely to invest resources in these areas compared to the other universities.
We would like to thank our advisors, Joe Doran and Ken Stafford, along with the AI experts who participated in our Delphi study, administration at WPI, and the ethicists who participated. We would now like to give you all the opportunity to see how each of our surveys were set up and presented to the survey participants. Please feel free to scan the QR codes shown in this slide. Thank you for your time. Does anyone have any questions?
Great, thanks so much. Questions? Who has questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So when you look at your different buckets, your different categories, and let's take your most prominent one, learning and instruction. Do you have a sense of the key questions that your AI would help address to improve the learning experience at WPI?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
we had a wide range of responses, and many of them had to do with intelligent agents. So for some of those 2030 predictions, we had computer scientists tell us that they already do use some automated grading. And then we also had some responses that kind of had to do with this current pandemic that we're dealing with right now, that AI might be able to provide assistance for this movement into somewhat of online learning as well.
In addition, the learning and instruction, there were a lot of predictions on personalized learning materials, so about creating tests, quizzes, homework assignments that are what the students are struggling with or need extra attention on based on AI, like themes and coding and other things that the students are doing in those classes.
And of course, that's my next question, and maybe it's not answerable, but how much data is needed to use AI to create a personalized experience?
So I guess I can't necessarily answer an exact number of how much data is needed, but the more data that is given to an AI, the more accurate it becomes. So definitely for it to really be considered accurate enough to be used by a lot of these institutions, they would need a lot of data before they could actually implement it.
Other questions?
Joe, if there are no more questions, I would like to make a comment, but it's not a question.
Absolutely.
It's not a question.
Well, wait, one second, Creighton. Why don't we come back to you? Ken, do you have a question?
Of course I do. You know, your survey, all the questions were kind of biased toward positives. You know, how can this help this? How can this help this? Did you think that there could be some negatives? I mean, AI can influence lots of things. Do you, in your research, was it overwhelming that people thought that AI was going to solve these problems more or less and not create new ones? I mean, just to connect with this, WPI's fame is established because of our student to faculty interaction. I could see that could be affected by this. Comments?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, there were a lot of, when we looked in further rounds, when the AI experts agreed and disagreed with different predictions from previous rounds, that's where we found a lot of like the negatives, like you mentioned, a lot of different experts as well as the WPI administration and staff and ethicists pointed out that the one-on-one interaction or the face-to-face interaction of learning and instruction and student experience is what makes WPI's learning and instruction or education management some of the best in the country. But it is worth noting that a lot of the predictions that we had were outside of necessarily making things move away from face-to-face interaction and more of the disability assistance and the personalized learning material and intelligent agents, that would just make those easier for certain students that might have different problems that they face for the way that things are handled now.
Great. Well, I'll just say thank you so much for agreeing to do this project. So this was one of mine that was on my research agenda for the year, so I can check that off the off the list. Provides an excellent jumping off point for further study on these strategic issues in higher education, in particular, right here with regard to AI and related topics. So thank you very much. And